Počkaj, vieš čo je dobré? Počkaj. Najhoršie veci zachytené na livestreame. To by sme mohli pozrieť. Nie? Toto môže byť dobré, chat. Erosíček do pohudky a ideme na to? Tak poďme Erosíček.
Live on Instagram while speeding down California roads. In the back seat is her 14-year-old sister Jacqueline and Jacqueline's girlfriend Manuela Ceja. Neither has their seatbelt fastened. And what was caught on camera next would enrage the public and horrify those unfortunate enough to see it. But before we show you the disturbing footage, we're going to see how the one behind the wheel arrived at this fateful moment, and whether her troubled past affects your perspective will be for you to decide. It would be fair to describe
Môj deň začal 2 kávami a tabakom, potom som pokračoval 6 vajíčkami a cesnakovým rožkom. Potom som mal... Čo som mal potom? Vývar z rejží, potom som mal shake s arašidovým maslom, s 2 proteínami a potom som mal znovu vývar.
As a wayward. She'd been that way since her younger years. Unpredictability wasn't completely without cause. At age 11, Obdulia had been sexually abused by someone close to her family. An incredibly traumatic experience no child should ever have to go through. But reality can be cruel. And so it was to her again. At age 13, Obdulia was abducted by a middle-aged man. Not only was she subjected to similar abuse, she was also forced to drink alcohol and take methamphetamines. Thankfully, this predator was caught and prosecuted, but his crimes against her marked the start of Obdulia's battle with illicit substances. It's reasonable to believe then that these horrific experiences were at least partially responsible for her antisocial behavior, though whether it serves as justification for what was to come is another matter entirely. In any case, her actions had put her on the wrong side of the law more than once, and by her mid-teen she'd found herself in juvenile court. There, Obdulia was ordered to attend rehabilitation. Though her time in rehab reportedly went well, at the age of 18 she was free to leave the program at her discretion. She opted to do so, but by leaving her group therapy home behind, she'd also cut off her access to the mental health support she'd been benefiting from. Not long after returning home, the crash we've just witnessed took place. A return to her old ways had set the stage for the tragedy. While Obdulia was playing to the camera with neither of her hands on the steering wheel, the 2003 car she was driving drifted onto the right shoulder of the road, and her reaction was to overcorrect, which caused her car to veer across several lanes, crash through a fence, and go tumbling into a nearby field. Both of the unsecured girls in the back were thrown from the vehicle as it rolled. Though censored, some viewers may find the following footage very disturbing.
Oh gosh.
The decision to keep filming after the accident was universally condemned. Opting to do so was bizarre all on its own, but the manner in which Obdulia shot the scene and what she said as she did so were arguably even more shocking. Seeing her sister Jacqueline's body on the ground, her instinct was to get back on camera. Her first thought isn't about Jacqueline, but the expectation that she's going to prison. There was something particularly unsettling about seeing a person adopt an angle to ensure that both their face and their sister's mutilated body are all in frame. Equally troubling are the frequent close-ups of the teen's life-ending injuries. Many were especially outraged by Obdulia's blasé language as she addressed the stream. I don't care though, I'm gonna hold it down. It does seem like quite an unthinkable choice of words given the circumstances, even when interspersed with apologies. What you can't see clearly thanks to the blur is that Jacqueline's head was split open during the crash, and at one point, Obdulia tried to close the enormous wound with her hand. Her strange actions were no doubt influenced by her compromised condition at the time, and so it won't come as a surprise to hear that Obdulia had been under the influence at the time of the crash. After the emergency services had arrived on the scene, she had allegedly kicked and spat at the medics. Due to her aggression, a blood test was carried out at the Los Baños Memorial Hospital. Her blood alcohol content was found to far exceed the legal limit. Her samples also tested positive for both marijuana and cocaine. Obdulia Sanchez was arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence and for causing the death of her sibling. When the legal process reached its end, she was sentenced to 6 years and 4 months for gross vehicular manslaughter while intoxicated. Miraculously, the second passenger, Manuela Ceja was able to walk away from the wreckage without any long-term damage, in a staggering show of maturity or an undue level of forgiveness. From her perspective, she harbors no ill will towards the woman who were in mortal danger and inadvertently took the life of her girlfriend. Jacqueline's tragic death was made infamous because it was broadcast online and went to be viewed by millions. Obdula's following on Instagram is relatively small, but it only takes one viewer to turn an obscure event into a viral horror show. In this case, that viewer is Mary Hernandez, who followed Obdula and screen recorded the crash. Hernandez re-uploaded the video to Facebook, where it received over 700,000 views before being removed. Her post is what allowed the troubling video to spread through media outlets, message boards, and shock sites. In an apparent attempt to justify sharing the graphic death of a teenager, she said the following.
As someone who uses Snapchat, I see a lot of people striving with their Snapchats and doing what she was doing, so to me it was like an eye-opener.
If the intention truly was to educate people on the dangers of reckless driving, then no one should understand the lesson better than Obdula Sanchez herself. If she'd managed to address her past trauma, learn from her mistakes, and change herself for the better, some small amount of good might have come from this whole affair. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case. The latter was the case of Raji Sharif Black, who broadcast his lowest point and made no attempt to hide its fatal consequences.
I would be doing this, but I gotta make it quick. For everybody out there that supported me and really knows what's going on, thank you all. I've been going through a custody battle. I've been going through having my ex-wife say I molested my children and all kinds of craziness. Been fighting for custody for 3 years. So, been real crazy. What's up, Oliver? You know about this. Going through it with my ex-wife, blah, blah, blah. So, and start dating somebody new. And she got pregnant. And, we got in a fight. First thing she does, threatening that she's going to do the same thing. You're never going to see your kids, blah, blah, blah. It's the holidays, man. I don't have no family, nothing.
The broad strokes of Raji's story here aren't uncommon, and there's a widespread belief that in a custody battle, the father tends to be at a disadvantage. 44 years old and working as a nurse, he was educated, articulate, and appeared downtrodden in a way that was relatable to men in similar circumstances. This garnered him a great amount of sympathy, in spite of the harrowing turn things were about to take.
Started dating somebody new, and she got pregnant, and we got in a fight. First thing she does, threatening that she's going to do the same thing. You're never going to see your kids, blah, blah, blah. It's the holidays, man. I don't have no family, nothing. Anyway, I just did something crazy, man. I just shot my ex-girlfriend in the head, yo.
With the children at the center of his turmoil mere feet away, Raji Sharif Black had just confessed to the murder of Tara Labang, his former co-worker and ex-girlfriend. At around 1:30 p.m. on December 11th, 2021 in Baltimore, Maryland, Raji had kicked through the door of Tara's apartment. Her neighbor's Ring doorbell had captured the sound of the 6 gunshots that killed the pregnant nurse. That neighbor quickly called the police, who found her body in her Marshall Street apartment just minutes later. His calm demeanor had given no indication in the bombshell he was about to drop on a handful of Facebook friends. As unbeknownst to them and the Baltimore PD, Raji wasn't done yet.
Anyway, I just did something crazy, man. I just shot my ex-girlfriend in the head, yo. Felt like a dream. Like, I never thought I would be that guy. I can't go to prison, so the person that really started my depression and all of this is my ex-wife. So she next, and then I'm going to do myself too.
The woman he just openly threatened to kill was Wendy Natalie Black, another medical professor and former partner. The two of them had been locked in a toxic custody battle since July of 2018, in which the mudslinging seemed to come from both sides. On 2 occasions since that time, Raji had been charged with domestic violence, and there's no record of who filed these charges, but one was dropped shortly after being filed and the other was dismissed by a judge. Now, a single domestic violence charge was also filed against Wendy Black, but this too was dropped by the individual who'd filed it. And while we can't say so definitively, this does suggest there was a tit for tat element to the legal actions of the separated couple. From the information we could gather, there's no record of Wendy having accused her ex-husband of child abuse. Perhaps this had happened in a private conversation, in a public setting rather than the courts, or it could have simply been a lie. What is included in court documents are several of Wendy's accounts of alleged abusive and threatening behavior. According to her, they included mistreatment of their dog, threats of suicide, threats against their children, and threatening to kill her with a gun. How much of this is true is impossible to discern, but regardless of whether Restt said he would shoot his ex-wife, the slaying of Tara Labang does prove that he had the capacity to do so. In an interview with CBS News, another former girlfriend confirmed that he did have access to firearms, though she hadn't ever felt afraid of him personally. Quote, Jay never cussed at me, he never raised a voice at me, he always told me because of what I had been through in a previous relationship of being abused that he would never hurt me. That's what he said to me. This anonymous ex gave no indication that he'd ever threatened suicide either, though did confirm that Black struggled with his mental health.
I felt like I was the only support system for him in a way, but I had to choose my sanity. I had to choose my own well-being. You know, when I broke up with him, I still loved him incredibly, but I knew that I had to put myself first. I couldn't be a part of it because he just wouldn't get help.
His reliance on this former partner was evident in a text he'd sent her. The message shown to CBS read, quote, there was a time that I was so low that I didn't want to live anymore. It was you that helped me get through it. With context like what we've just heard, it's not too surprising that some would feel a degree of sympathy. Compounding the sense that Restt may have been wronged was his allegedly unfair dismissal by a previous employer. There, he claimed to have been fired after having reported a doctor who'd been stealing drugs. While this would be unfair if it's true, there's an aspect of Restt's character that calls his version of events into question. By nature, he seemed averse to accepting any responsibility for his hardships. His old Facebook page stands as proof. There, he frequently made reference to a friend of his ex-wife, who he believed poisoned her against him. He went so far as to make a picture of her as his profile image, in an attempt to name and shame. Even in happier moments, his bitterness about what he perceived as a betrayal still seemed to rise to the surface. It's worth having this in mind while viewing the most chilling part of his livestream.
The person that really started my depression and all of this is my ex-wife. So she next, and then I'm going to do myself too. But I just wanted to say this to people. Don't play with people's emotions, man. Don't lie on these men. Oh, here's my ex-wife right here.
The entirety of the brief stream had been recorded right outside of Wendy Black's apartment on Edenbrook Drive in Columbia, Maryland. As her ex-husband forces his way into her home, Wendy is told today is the day. Moments later, she was fatally shot. Having been blamed for causing Restt's mental health struggles, he then turned the gun on himself. Soon after the death of Tara Labang, the Baltimore PD had learned of the livestream in which Black had confessed and stated his intent to kill again. By the time they were able to contact the Howard County PD, who were responsible for policing the area in which the stream had taken place, it was already much too late. The entire ordeal took place in a span of around 30 minutes. Fortunately, the children were unharmed, and had not witnessed any of the violence committed by their dad.
And I could see one little girl in there crying, and I peeked in the window again, and then I saw the second girl in there, and I was, trying to calm them down.
The two little girls neighbor Michael Eisenberg says he found inside a running BMW after Saturday's apparent murder-suicide on Edenbrook Drive in Columbia are, according to online court records, at the center of a contentious, years-long custody battle between the murder suspect, Ray J. Black, and the murder victim, his wife, Wendy Black.
A friend of Restt went on to re-upload his final broadcast to Twitter and echoed his sentiments. Much of the public reaction followed suit, as a result of Restt's self-penned tale of woe. It seems then that it's all too easy to forget the woman and the unborn child who lost their lives that day, and the two girls left orphaned by their father's thirst for revenge. So far, we've seen a tragic yet avoidable accident, and an individual who felt the need to justify his crimes before doubling down on them. But now we're going to look at someone entirely different, a streamer whose deliberate harassment and hatred of women left some fearing for their lives, and whose actions put him on the radar of none other than the FBI. This is Malik Sanchez, better known as Smooth Sanchez to his insular audience. Sanchez is a self-confessed incel, or involuntary celibate.
Excuse me, would you like to have a conversation with an incel? Who's making fun of me because I'm an incel?
Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this, members of incel communities are typically men and are united by their belief that they're unable to attract a romantic partner. This belief, coupled with an unwarranted sense of entitlement, has led many of them to develop a deep-seated bitterness and a kind of juvenile rage. They focus their anger on the women they believe scorn them, and the men who succeed where they fail.
I have a question, babe. Can I get your number? I'm too good looking for you anyway. Too good looking for you anyway. You look like Lord Farquaad if he was a female. Yup, you're never gonna get Chad. What's that? You're never gonna get Chad. 6 foot Chad? Never. Never.
Yeah, really? I think so.
You would have went out with me in the 90s.
Sanchez, who enjoyed acting like this, was apparently mystified by the notion that females wanted nothing to do with him, and managed to reach the conclusion that everyone else was the problem. His particular blend of self-pity, social ineptitude, childish anger, and a constant need for attention allowed him to carve out a niche in the world of in-real-life streaming. This genre of content typically features the streamer interacting with strangers on the street, and it was the unsuspecting residents of Manhattan, New York, who had the misfortune of dealing with Sanchez. The audience he cultivated frequently encouraged him to harass the public, perform pointless stunts, and assault people with pepper spray, referred to as content spray by viewers and Sanchez himself. One look at the guy is enough to tell us that he'd struggled to fight his way out of a wet paper bag, though when he was on camera, he seemed to believe he was Mike Tyson in his prime. It was the pepper spray, never far from his grasp, that emboldened him, and the promise of its use seemed to be the primary draw for many of his followers. When it came to bothering men, Sanchez's MO usually began with trying to start an innocuous conversation in a deliberately abrasive tone.
Doing good? What is Santa getting you this Christmas?
He'd follow that up with attempts to escalate the situation through insults, homophobic language, and a little anti-Semitism sprinkled in.
What? Why do you sound like a... Are you Jewish? Are you Jewish? What's wrong with you?
In the event, he was able to get a reaction to the pepper spray and cry self-defense, all while blaming the victim for being too sensitive.
Fucking serious? Are you fucking serious? You want problems? Are you fucking crazy? You trying to attack me for filming you? Are you fucking serious? Shut the fuck up. I'm tired of people like you, man. I'm fucking tired of people like you. You take everything that I say to offense.
Occasionally things wouldn't go his way, and although he tried to stick to the tough guy act, the mask would occasionally slip if anyone actually called his bluff.
Are you fucking serious right now? Watch this. Look at him. I'm calling the cops. Calling the cops.
Som zvedavý, keď nenatrafí na nesprávneho.
I'm calling the police. You just assaulted me. Bro, he's running after me right now. Guys, he's running after me right now.
Best content on
With
YouTube.
women, when he wasn't being justifiably rejected or hurling insults, he'd often try to make them feel uncomfortable or unsafe in a way that he could try to play off as a joke.
See, you're not a Stacy either. You're not a Stacy either. But I will take your number though, because you work out, you know, you're fit. I'm kidding. You're actually, you know what? I changed my mind. You're fat. You're fat and I changed my mind. Fat and I changed my mind. Yes, I'm body shaming you. Yes, I am. Body shaming. You're fat. You whale. You fat whale.
Frequently, this meant bringing up his incel idols, Alec Minassian, and in particular, Elliot Rodger.
I bust that shit. I fucking buzz that shit for Elliot Rodgers all fucking day. I bust that shit for Travis Bickle. Travis Bickle. Yeah, Travis Bickle, taxi driver. Fucking real ass motherfucker, man.
For context, Elliot Rodger was a self-confessed involuntary celibate and a complete narcissist. He was so convinced that he was exceptional in some way that he couldn't fathom why he wasn't inundated with female attention. In Rodger's mind, he was doing all the right things, like driving an expensive car and wearing designer clothes. But what he wasn't doing was actually talking to any girls, as is a running theme with many incels. Instead of making a small amount of effort to grasp basic social concepts, he surmised that women enjoyed denying him and were deliberately making him suffer. It's an odd conclusion to reach when, as far as we can tell, he'd never actually been turned down because he'd never given anyone the opportunity to do so. Nevertheless, it was what he chose to believe. Rodger decided that his bizarre self-pitying fantasy justified violence. And on May 23, 2014, he enacted what he called his retribution, in which he took the lives of 7 people, including himself, injuring 14 others because he believed he hadn't been given the sexual attention that he was owed. Now, the more you learn about Rodger, the more pathetic he seems. But this hasn't stopped him becoming a hero to those with a similar mindset. And given what he did, it's fair to perceive Sanchez's behavior as a threat when he constantly brings up the name and jokes about emulating his crimes.
You stupid bitch. You stupid bitch. You deny me? You like that? You like that? Give me something to lose. I have nothing to lose. I have nothing to lose. I have nothing to lose. Hey, listen up right quick. When I'ma spit it one time, y'all gonna have to suck me off or I'ma go crazy on the block. I'ma kill everyone on my block like Elliot Rodgers, like Alec Minassian.
You're out of your mind. It's a
No, I'ma just have to do it one time. When I kill these niggas right in their face, I'ma pop them right in their goddamn face. I'ma do it one time. I'ma pop them Glocks off. Blow the brains all day. I'ma blow your brains all day.
For Sanchez and his audience, making women feel threatened was part of the fun and half of the point. However, it wouldn't be his outright misogyny that would boost his profile and ultimately lead to his downfall. Instead, it would be the self-crowned king of content's efforts to outdo other in real life streamers that would come back to bite him, but not before it gave him the attention he craved.
Breaking news on the Queensboro Bridge, where a person climbed up part of the bridge and then streamed the stunt live on YouTube. Traffic was slowed to a crawl as emergency units work to get the person down. We're told the climber is now in custody. Lanes were blocked going westbound on the upper level. The left lane on the upper eastbound level also was blocked. But again, the young man is now in police custody.
In order to raise the bar, as he put it, Sanchez began to increase the level of stupidity in his output. He stuck to a strategy of inconveniencing people for the sake of entertainment, but managed to do so en masse with what remains his second most infamous stunt. It entailed climbing the Queensboro Bridge, which connects the island of Manhattan to Queens. Bridges of its type are all too easy to climb, as due to their construction, they're effectively giant ladders. Spurred on by his chat, he clambered up the supports until he reached a convenient spot to film from. Once there, he patted himself on the back for his accomplishment. Such a climb is also taken very seriously by the authorities, as there's no way of telling what the climber has planned. As a result, the entire crossing was closed until responders reached Sanchez, to a chorus of racial slurs from the chat. His audience had been happy to bankroll his antics, so he'd instructed family members to withdraw the cash prior to be taken into custody, likely for bail. The stream would actually land him a spot on the news, and although he'd occasionally exaggerate the size of his audience, his YouTube channel did actually peak at about 6,000 subscribers, so this kind of mainstream coverage was by far the most relevant he'd ever felt, as he told himself he believed he wouldn't be able to top it, and in the end, he'd be right. Sanchez didn't pull off anything else so eye-catching, but he would draw the kind of attention he couldn't worm his way out of.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Bomb detonation in two minutes. That shit, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna fucking do it for Allah. I'm going to do it for Allah. Allahu Akbar. Come on, I do it. Bomb now. Yo, all of them scattered.
That's debilos, eh?
Yo.
Te retard.
Racist accents made a semi-regular appearance whenever Sanchez was live, and they aren't usually the sort of thing the FBI would get out of bed for. Bomb threats, however, are, no matter how immature in nature they happen to be. And given he'd filmed the crime, there was nothing the walking 4chan post could do when the feds came knocking. Upon raiding the East Village apartment Sanchez shared with his mother, law enforcement discovered 5 magazines for a Glock, though found no firearm to pair them with. It's strange for him to have owned these but not a weapon, and given his obsession with an incel mass shooter, it does seem like a red flag. Having said that, there doesn't appear to have been any indication the streamer was planning for violence, beyond using mace to blind random New Yorkers. As we'd expect, Sanchez found himself in front of a judge this time. Prior to the bomb hoax, he'd been arrested on 7 separate occasions, which prosecution argued should assure he served time in prison. Quote, he's been a menace to the community for years, all while spouting incel ideology, said the assistant US attorney Kaylin Lasky. Sanchez himself claimed he learned a lesson from the whole ordeal, telling the court, first and foremost, I would like to apologize. Basically apologize for all the fear I put into these women that day. I feel I should thank you because the behavior I was displaying was immature and that of a child. The fear he mentioned having caused was real. One of the women who'd been there during the streamer's ludicrous outburst contributed via letter. She told the court that she'd left the city for a time and she no longer felt safe there and believed there might be a legitimate risk of a terrorist attack. Quote, Mr. Sanchez altered my faith in humanity and made me realize there are truly bad people out there who enjoy seeing others suffer. Ultimately, the judge would deny the prosecution's request for prison time, feeling that Sanchez had made strides to turn his life around. Between his arrest and his sentencing on April 6th of 2022, Malik Sanchez had attended therapy, which he claimed had changed him. In that same span, he'd earned his high school diploma and expressed an interest in joining the military. In the end, he was sentenced to 9 months of home confinement and 3 years of probation, during which all of his online devices would be monitored. By that time, YouTube had already deleted his channel for hate speech. As of now, his Instagram is private, and his Twitter hasn't shown any activity since March of 2021. Hopefully this means Malik has outgrown his old ways, and left smooth Sanchez behind him for good.
No jasné.
But our final subject today is one that requires a little background info for most to understand, especially those of us living in the West. Typically when we think of streaming, we tend to associate it with gaming, creative endeavors like art or music production, just chatting and so on. Smaller but familiar subcategories have their place, such as in real life streams, but generally speaking, even those are innocuous. Elsewhere in the world though, there's a genre of live stream that has managed to gain a disturbing level of prominence, and it's known as trash streaming. Trash streaming is aptly named, given trash is a fair descriptor of those who participate. At their core, trash streams are about causing harm for the purpose of entertainment, whether it befalls the streamer themselves or the other participants who might be willing or unwilling. There's a great deal of variation in what viewers pay to see, especially when it comes to voluntary participants. They often entail drinking dangerous levels of alcohol, fights, enacting cruel pranks, performing dangerous stunts, or committing acts of self-harm, among many other things. When it comes to the involuntary ones, the content can often be darker. The extreme end of the spectrum has been known to feature random acts of violence, domestic abuse, and even sexual assault. The majority of streamers in this niche and the lion's share of their audience are based in either Eastern Europe or most prominently Russia. And given the economic state in many of these nations, the cost of having someone assault their friend or violate a stranger is often extremely low, but the audience still exists, and they're willing to pay. With this backdrop in place, it's time to introduce Stanislav Resttniak, aka Stas Reflay. Stanislav is undoubtedly among the worst streamers to ever go live, and luckily for him, the worst of humanity is what his viewers were there to see, but the way his days online would come to an end would even shock them, though they were still content to watch the acts of cruelty that would strip him of what would charitably cool his career, and his depravity would cost the victim far more. When Stanislav was on screen, so was alcohol, and the flow of drinks assured that the flow of aggression and stupidity was unending. A frequent victim was this tragic friend of his who kept coming back in spite of the constant humiliation. Over time, he seemed to develop a habit of simply submitting, effectively playing dead. In the event that this man stood up for himself, the degradation only got worse. If Stanislav wasn't bothering his metaphorical punch bag, there's a good chance he'd be fighting with his inebriated co-stars. In at least one instance, Stas got an unexpected taste of his own medicine. And this says a lot about him, that having been knocked out cold on his own stream, his only complaint afterwards was that someone had turned the camera away while he was still being attacked. Provided someone was suffering, Stanislav was pleased. But the one who suffered most for the amusement of his audience was his on-again, off-again girlfriend, Valentina Maximovna, who went by Valya online. According to those who knew her, she was kind and caring. She was an animal lover who'd owned a dog and rescued several stray cats. She was also quiet, tended to keep to herself, and yet had ambitions to work in the entertainment industry. Her reservedness would fall by the wayside when alcohol was involved, however, and was always involved in her toxic relationship with Stas Reflay. She was a very flawed person, but also a woman with no choice but to live in a flawed culture. In Russia, domestic violence is a plague, and one that's become socially acceptable. Surveys indicate that around 70% of women in the country have been victims of domestic violence, though the numbers could be higher still, as many cases go unreported due to fear and feelings of shame. The ubiquity of in-home abuse was strengthened in 2017, when thanks to the efforts of the Russian Orthodox Church, domestic violence was decriminalized in cases where it does not result in substantial bodily harm. When lawmakers cast their votes, 380 were in favor of the change, and just 3 opposed it. And so what this means is that when Stanislav treated his girlfriend like this, it was entirely legal. Sometimes he would do so out of anger, on other occasions it was at his viewers' behest, but predictably she would be the victim, in Stanislav's most reprehensible online appearance. Stas Reflay's final stream took place in the early hours of December 2nd, 2020. Stanislav, Valya, and a friend of hers were broadcasting from the streamer's rented home in a village near Moscow. At some stage during the night, tempers flared due to a jealous argument. As was typical, things became violent.
To sú vyjebanci, chlapci, fakt. To niekde je proste chorý na hlavu, chápeš? Tik pred lakyne, mi na chvíľku párkrát vypadol chat, ale už mi ide.
The stream cut out when it did because Valia had disconnected the internet, though whether this was intentional or accidental during the struggle is impossible to know. When the stream returned, Stanislav was seated on his computer. During the downtime, he'd stripped his girlfriend of all her clothes but her underwear, and according to some reports, dumped cold water all over her. He'd then forced her onto the balcony where she was exposed to sub-zero temperatures for around 15 minutes. Allegedly, Stas was paid $1,000 by a viewer to do so, but that payment isn't featured in any of the archive streams as far as we can tell. Regardless, while his girlfriend was lying unresponsive in the hallway, his attention was on how to abuse her further. Note that the affectionate language only began when the gravity of what he'd done began to set in.
Valia. Pekné meno, že?
Бля, ребят, мне кажется, она мертвая, нахуй. Я вам отвечаю. Валя. Валь, ты живая? Блядь, не надо скорую помощь вызывать. Мне кажется, она мертвая, ребят. Бля, а как мне вызвать скорую помощь? Пиздец, блядь, ребят, блядь. Я вам отвечаю, мне кажется, у нее нет даже сердцебиения, Валь.
Áno, streamuj ty
Валь,
gubaje,
ты
blá,
живая,
retardovaná.
заяц мой. Ну ты чего? Валь, ты живая.
Pozval si 5 myší?
Блядь, ты как мертвый, блядь, Валь.
Vidím jednu.
Заяц, ну ты чего?
Some of those watching urged him to get help, though his phone wasn't working. With that off the cards, he seemed to be out of all ideas.
Я не могу позвонить, у меня телефон разбитый, пиздец. Ну как мне позвонить, блядь? Валя.
Eventually, he acted on a viewer's suggestion to speak to his neighbors. The brief trip outside is why we see him wearing a coat here. Stanislav's reason for having left her in the hallway is a phenomenon some of you will no doubt be aware of.
Бухал до этого, только все, не бухал там, поздурил с ней, немного леща пару и въебал ей нахуй. И что, все?
It's an indignity that befalls us when we pass, though few have announced it on camera with their body in shot. Likely aware of the truth, the streamer made a point to emphasize his feelings for his departed girlfriend. When assistance arrived, it came in the form of an especially blunt medical professional.
Ну вот, проверьте ее, пожалуйста. Мертвая? Что?
Да ладно.
Все, мертвая?
Это что, с тех пор еще снимаете дом?
Да.
Столько времени. Мертвая, конечно.
Мертвая?
Да. Документы есть или?
Нету.
Она кто? Как?
Моя подруга.
In the dying seconds of the stream, the paramedic's expression suggests that even after her arrival, empathy remained in short supply.
То есть я виноват в ее смерти?
Какие взял? Сколько вы?
Проблема была в том, что вот мы побухали, короче, отдохнули.
Ты ее сколько знаешь?
Знаю год.
Год?
Stanislav was correct. His ship was indeed sinking. Soon after he'd said as much, he was arrested under suspicion of involuntary manslaughter. His actions had caused the death of his own girlfriend and caught the attention of both domestic and global journalists, and a media circus ensued.
Обвиняемые в деле о гибели девушки во время прямой трансляции в интернете тысячи подписчиков наблюдали за тем, как умирала Валентина Григорьева. При этом Решетняк не останавливал стрим, продолжал пить шампанское и общаться с подписчиками. Конечно, все это вызвало скандал. В сетях стала появляться информация, которая характеризует Рифлея не с лучшей стороны. Его коллеги по цеху рассказывали множество историй о том, на что был готов Решетняк ради хайпа и доната.
While he wasn't denying responsibility, he did make several attempts to diminish this. However, these lacking attempts at justification fell flat, and appeared particularly callous when another upsetting detail was brought into the conversation. Valia had claimed to be in the early stages of pregnancy prior to the stream that ended her life. Stanislav denied this, and appeared cagey about admitting to the nature of their relationship.
Какие у вас отношения с Валентиной были?
Дружеские. Моя любимая подруга.
Ваша любимая подруга или ваша девушка?
Моя любимая подруга.
То есть у вас были сексуальные отношения?
Была интимная связь, но мы не встречались. Я всегда говорил, что мы будем дружить и много другое.
А это правда, что она была от вас беременна?
Нет.
Expectedly, his lawyer tried to fabricate an image in a scenario that might make his client seem palatable. The best chance his defense had was to portray what had happened as a kind of prank gone wrong, wherein Stanislav had pushed his girlfriend outside, not fully understanding the danger he'd put her in. This may have had a slim chance of success in the beginning, when the authorities were working under the assumption that hypothermia was the cause of death. However, Valya's autopsy would prove otherwise. It was the beatings that had killed Valentina, and if they hadn't that day, odds are that they would have on another. And while the fact that much of her end was caught on stream is the reason any of us know her story, the reality is that the abuse she suffered wasn't out of the ordinary. The only difference is that it usually isn't on camera, and so Stanislav was charged with involuntary manslaughter and later sentenced to just 6 years in a maximum security prison colony, where he remains to this day. Due to the uproar surrounding the case, Russia does now recognize trash streaming as aggravating circumstances under its criminal code, with fines as high as $6,700 for crimes committed during a live stream. However, domestic violence seems to remain legal.
Čo ti jebe? To sú vyjebanci, že? Počkaj, normálne gulag, fakt jak hovoríš. Čo iné? Darkest TikTok videos, to nechcem vidieť. No nič, skoro potrebne, môžeme ísť. Šedlec za vraždu, Rusko. No, tyko, to je halucináč celkom, že? Čo tu by si dostal? Aj tu možno. Možno by mu to aj prepáčili.